Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 9 of Interview with Scientist series. Today we have Dr. Roopali Chaudhary. Roopali is the founder and CEO and lead researcher of Lotus STEMM. She is also a senior scientist specializing in cell biology at Alata Life Science and a research associate at McMaster University. Today we'll talk with Roopali about her research, career transition, women in STEM, Lotus STEM, and tips and guidance on starting a non-profit organization. Thank you, Rupali, for joining us. And as I mentioned, we will be talking a lot of STEM today. So,
Yes. Thanks for the invite. I'm happy to be here.
our pleasure. Thank you for accepting it. So, let's start with the basic question about your PhD research and what do you do at McMaster University?
hmm so my PhD was focused on looking at inflammatory bowel disease, and that wasn't the start of
Mhm.
where the project was going to be.
Okay.
We had a specific protein of interest that the lab studies. It's
Okay.
called Kaizo. It's a transcription factor that does act mostly as a repressor, but it can activate certain genes.
Okay.
It's fairly new. I guess it's not as new anymore. It was discovered in 99
Okay.
by my PI. Um, and so when I joined the lab, my project was to characterize the overexpression of this protein,
Okay.
specifically in the intestines.
Okay.
And what that led to is a chronic inflammatory phenotype in the mice. So I ended up working on serendipitously, I kind of characterized a transgenic mouse model
Okay.
that has chronic inflammation and actually would be a really good mouse model to study inflammatory bowel disease that affects many people around the
Oh,
world. It's one of those silent diseases that we don't tend to talk about as much.
yes.
Um, and IBD can also lead, there's a high probability of people who live with IBD
Yeah.
to develop colorectal cancer as
Okay.
well. So my work was to characterize the mouse model and understand the inflammatory
Mhm.
side of it and what
Yes.
is this protein doing.
Okay.
And that has led to many projects in the lab where they're now studying to see what happens between IBD to colorectal cancer.
Okay. That's interesting. And can you tell us something about your work at Alata Life Science?
I can tell you as much as I'm allowed to say. No.
Definitely.
um, So a lot of life sciences, we work on mostly, it's a chemistry based company, and they work on developing specific polymer capsules that can be used in vivo.
Okay.
What my position is to find a way that we can use primary islets taken
Okay.
from rats, have
Okay.
them functional, encapsulated in these polymer capsules that the company makes,
Uh-huh.
and put them back into animals to see if we can cure diabetes.
Okay.
Now, where this is actually going is that diabetes, people who live with type 2 diabetes and are dependent on insulin, or
Yes.
type 1 diabetes and are dependent on insulin,
Yeah.
a lot of times their islet cells and their pancreas are not producing sufficient amount of
Okay.
insulin. So
Okay.
they inject it into themselves. It's very
Okay.
painful.
Yeah.
It's expensive,
Yeah.
um, and it's something that sometimes they can end up overshooting the amount of
Okay.
insulin. Other
Yes.
times, stress can cause their sugar to spike in
Okay.
between
Yes.
insulin injections. So there's issues there.
Yeah.
What we're hoping to do is with these capsules and working with primary islets,
Yes.
injecting them into people, it is a regulated way where the islets can self-regulate. They can determine
Yes.
how much insulin needs to be released based off
Uh-huh.
sugar levels. So instead of injecting every single day, maybe
Yeah.
it's like once in 6 months.
Okay. That's very
So
interesting.
we're working on more of a therapeutic cure, but
Yeah.
the company focuses on actually developing the polymer side
Polymers.
of things.
Okay. So yeah, that's very interesting actually. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. Yeah. My dad lives with diabetes, so I
Yes.
know how much it can affect. And within the South Asian community, diabetes
Yes.
is one of the most popular disease. Everyone
Disease.
you talk to is like, "Oh, I have sugar, and so I take this." And it's it is in our genetics.
Yes.
We are predisposed to it. And there's been research to show that the more urban lifestyle you live, the
Yes.
likelihood of you developing diabetes is higher, especially amongst South Asians.
Yes.
And gestational diabetes, so that's diabetes developed during pregnancy, is also very high amongst South Asians. And
Okay.
there's research to show that if a mom has diabetes during pregnancy, that
Yes.
child has a greater probability of developing diabetes later on in life.
Yes.
So for us, in terms of epigenetics, we
Yes.
already are predisposed to it. So working with Alara to me is, it feels very close to heart that I'm actually working on something that could potentially be a therapeutic that could benefit not just my dad, but
But
there's such a large community that would benefit from it, especially
yes,
those that live with type 1 diabetes,
definitely.
like little
And
kids.
yeah, like because I can totally relate with you because my dad is suffering from diabetes, and that increases my chances as well of having diabetes. So I'm taking full control. I check my sugar level every 10-15 days because I don't have diabetes, but it's a good habit to keep
Yeah.
track. I'm in that age group now that I can develop it anytime.
Yep.
And the most important thing, I love sweets. So
And it doesn't help that Indian sweets are so sweet
so
too.
sweet, yes. So, I read your bio, and you mentioned that you have a lot of experience on working with different animal models. Again, I totally relate with that because when I started my master's, I was working with fish. But was it difficult to change animal models for you during your research journey?
Absolutely. Oh my God. I first started off working on fruit flies, so
Okay.
Drosophila melanogaster,
Yeah.
and that's easy enough. They're flies. They fall asleep easily with CO2. You literally use a paintbrush and you push them around. So it's called fly
Yes.
pushing. It's something that any Drosophila person is accustomed to doing.
Yes.
From there, so that was my undergrad, my master's, and then I went to do my PhD, and now all of a sudden I was working on a mouse model.
Uh-huh.
And I have never held a mouse before that, let alone any other animal. Like I didn't grow up with pets, so I didn't
Okay.
have a dog or a cat, and I wasn't
Yeah.
used to animals in my hand. My training, when you go into the animal facility, you have a certain level of training that you have to do to ensure that you're going to be handling your animals ethically.
Yes.
And I almost fainted.
Okay.
So I was so stressed. My
Yes.
shoulders were up to my ears. I was sweating buckets. It wasn't a pleasant experience, but I made it through. I got my permit to go in, and
Yes.
every single day I would go and stare at the mice in the cage for 2.5 hours, hoping that I'd be able to pick one up.
Okay.
It took me months before I was comfortable enough to put my hand in the cage to pick them up.
Okay. Yeah.
By the end of my PhD, this was happening all the time. It didn't affect me as much.
I see.
Um, when I switched over to my postdoc, I actually had to work with animals a lot more because now I was doing experiments. It was food allergy related. So I was
Yes.
actually working with the animals alive and awake most
Yes.
of the time. So that was another learning experience, getting comfortable with them again, being able to give them injections or
Yeah.
oral gavage. That was another whole experience. Having a mouse bite you is a different
Different
experience.
experience. Yes.
Um, and now with Alarda, I don't actually do a lot of the animal work. I do cell work
Okay.
mostly, but I am trained to go in and work with rats if need be, which
Okay.
are so much better than mice, by the way.
I
They're
agree with
s-
that.
they're so calm. They
Yes.
squeak a little and then they're like, "Sure, pick me up if you want to. It's fine."
Yes.
So it was a transition for sure. Every new organism that you work with, every new cell line you work with, you
That's
have to
great.
relearn, you have to understand how they behave
Yes.
before you get truly comfortable. So that transition, I think, comes for everyone.
Yeah. And yes, as like you, as I mentioned, I started working with fish, which was relatively easy. Pick up a fish. But yeah, I had
Yeah.
my own problems because that was my first time handling a live fish in a tank. Then I moved to mice. I was not very happy. They were not happy with me either. But during my
Mice are just
PhD,
not happy animals.
no. Then I moved to rats for my PhD, and I was so relieved. Like they were really happy with me. I used to name them. I had a lot of fun
Yeah.
with them. Social interaction.
Yes. And they respond really well to
Yes.
sweets.
Yes. Peanut butter.
Yes. Cheerios is another one.
Cereals. Yes. They do. They do like everything.
Yeah.
So I can understand your transition phase from different animal models. Although I haven't worked with flies.
Probably easier than fish.
Fish. Yes. Fly poaching is something that I have to read about now. That sounds a really interesting term. So, how do you manage your work? Like I say, you work at 3 to 4 different places. You have your own organization. You work as a research associate, as a
Yes.
scientist. How do you manage?
Um, how do I manage? I have a very strong support system around me.
Great.
So my family, my partner, anytime that they see me getting very stressed out because of
Yes.
work, they are very quick to step in and be like, "You need to take a break. You need to step away from everything."
Yeah.
Um, and that I think you need to have someone in your life that's willing to tell you that you're doing too much and
Yes.
you need to take a step back.
Yeah.
That's one thing that keeps me sane. The other thing is I actually started keeping like separate to-do lists,
Hmm.
and I only plan 1 week in advance.
Okay.
And so there's only so much I can do.
Yeah.
There's like everyone else, I only have 24 hours. I need to sleep and eat.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm very good at ensuring that my to-do list is only for 1 week and it's
Mhm.
something that's manageable. And for every single day, there's maybe three important things,
Yes.
depending on what my experimental schedule looks like.
Yeah.
Um, no more than three. If I start to put more than three important things, then I'm expecting too much from myself.
Okay.
And there's a lot of allowing yourself to ask for help.
Yes.
There's, as you said, I have my own organization, and
Yes.
when I got my positions, I actively reached out to the volunteers and let them know that I am taking these positions financially. I need to,
Yes.
and I'm also interested as part of my own career. I'm going to need to have you guys step up more. I'm
Yes.
going to be delegating a lot more. And
Yeah.
I'm sorry I'm not going to be there like all the time as I was
Yes.
before I had positions. Um, and every single one of them have stepped up. Every single one
Okay.
of them have taken on because they believe in Lotus STEM. They believe in what the mission is.
Yes.
The old Rupali would have never done that and would have struggled to try and do everything herself.
Okay.
And I think that's a big thing. It's like you can have as many positions as you want, but if you don't trust the people around you to support you and to ask for help, you're going to drown.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. I am finding it difficult. I sometimes find so difficult. Sometimes find it difficult to manage addictive brain, my work and job applications. So it's a lot
Yeah.
of work, and I can totally relate again. So, do you have any time management tips for people?
Time management tips. So there's an app that I do use on a regular basis. It's called Forest.
Okay.
And it's something that keeps me off my phone,
Yeah.
and it allows me to, I was going to say aliquot, not aliquot, allocate a certain amount of
Yes.
time.
Yeah.
Um, so what it is you can set a timer anywhere between 20 minutes to 2 hours. Maximum
Yes.
is 2 hours.
Yes.
Um, and in that time, you can choose a type of plant or tree that you want to
Yes.
put in your virtual garden and
Yeah.
create a forest for yourself. So
Okay.
everything from like watermelons to squash to the most beautiful um, orchids, if you
Yes.
want to put that, like you can do it at different and for each time the tree or the plant will get bushier, so you
Okay.
can look at virtually look at your garden.
Yes.
Every time you complete the timer that you had set, it
Yes.
does, this sounds like an advertisement for the app, but they will, you get a seed, and after you've collected a certain number of seeds, you
Yes.
can pay the founders of the app to actually plant a real tree somewhere in the world.
Okay.
So it's still giving back to the environment.
Yeah.
And what I find using that app is breaking your tasks up into
Mhm.
smaller chunks. So
Yes.
saying, I'm going to work for half an hour on this.
Yes.
It's on my phone. I can't use my phone for anything now,
Yeah.
and force myself to just work small chunks, forces breaks during the day,
Yeah.
keeps me more productive because I'm not just staring at a computer.
Yes.
And it also gives me like, okay, if this is 30 minutes, another thing is going to take me 2 hours. I
Hmm.
can put that 2 hours. I don't sit and work longer than 2 hours at one time.
Okay.
I will take a 5 minute break. I will stretch. Maybe I'll
Yes.
go get a glass of water. I sometimes do lunges to the refrigerator
Yeah.
to grab like milk or something. Um, to try and you need to break up your day. You
Yeah.
can't keep doing the same thing.
Same
It's
thing.
too mundane and your brain stops.
Yeah.
You're not
Definitely.
productive.
Definitely. Thank you for the tip and for telling us about the app that you use.
Yes.
I'll
I
download it
want
and
more
try
people to use it.
it. Yes, I'll download and try it today. So, can you tell us about something about Lotus STEM? What is Lotus STEM?
What is Lotus STEM? Um, so Lotus STEM is a Canadian registered nonprofit,
Hmm.
and we focus on creating a networking and leadership platform for South Asian women
Okay.
in STEM fields, including medicine.
Okay.
Um, why I started Lotus STEM is actually because I was looking for a community and support system.
Okay.
When I started it, I was doing my postdoc, and I didn't exactly have the most positive experience in my postdoc. And I found myself constantly questioning if I belonged in STEM,
Yeah.
whether or not I was a good scientist.
Yes.
Um, and I was learning to balance some of the responsibilities that are put on me as a South Asian woman and some of the responsibilities that were put on me as a woman in STEM and some
Yes.
of the responsibilities put on me as a postdoc. And
Yeah.
I couldn't, it felt like such an intersection, and I didn't have anyone that I could actually reach out to.
Yeah.
So I started Lotus STEM hoping that I would find people who are in similar situations and it would be like a venting session.
Yes.
That's where it started off.
Hmm.
Where it is now, we are 2.5 or almost 2.5 years in of
Yes.
actually setting it up. I am so blessed to have wonderful volunteers that help run Lotus STEM.
Yeah.
We have regulated programs. So we have a mentorship program. It's run by Miss Jovita Pinto. She's the program lead. She's an aerospace engineer.
Okay.
And when she joined, she was like, we need a mentorship program for young girls.
Yes.
The way we set this up, it's 16 plus. You can be anywhere in the world.
Mhm.
You do not have to identify as a South Asian woman,
Yeah.
but we do gear towards that. Um, and mentors have to have 1 year, minimum 1 year experience in their field.
Okay.
You do not have to identify as a South Asian woman,
Yeah.
and you can be anywhere in the world, but we will match you up. You will have one mentee or
Yeah.
one mentor.
Yeah.
In few cases, there are two, but it's mostly a dyad relationship, and it's a 6 month program. They learn how to develop
Yes.
their SMART goals. They learn how to use those goals to how to take a bigger career aspiration and break it down into smaller achievable goals,
Okay.
and hopefully develop a mentorship relationship that they'll have for long term.
Yeah.
So that's one of the programs. We also do monthly conversations about equity in STEM.
Okay.
And this is done through our The Pond,
Mhm.
idea being if we are all lotuses, we grow in a pond together and
Yes.
therefore a network. And this is run by Manasvi, who
Mhm.
is a science communicator in India, and she's actually doing a master's right now.
Okay.
And she does these monthly chats, and we invite different people. It's open to everyone. You
Yeah.
just have to sign up as a member on our website,
Okay.
and you have access to come in and join the conversations monthly basis, an hour and a half, listen to some
Okay.
like-minded people. We also have something called Baksh, which is a mental health support group for
Yeah.
international graduate students.
Okay.
And this was something that was very important to me. This
Mhm.
is run by Dr. Jayashree Subramaniam,
Okay.
who's working in India right now.
Yeah.
And for both of us, we know graduate school is difficult.
Yes.
Mental health in graduate school is now being talked about more,
Yes.
but the support systems are not there.
Yeah.
Furthermore, if you're an international graduate student, that is
Mhm.
such a tight intersection that they fall through the cracks because local graduate students may or may not have health benefits.
Yes.
International graduate students probably don't.
Yeah.
So we created this support system. It is a 4-month support system, and we finished our first round last year
Uh-huh.
during the pandemic.
Okay.
Um, and we talk about abuse and harassment in grad school. We talk
Okay.
about not being heard. We talked about as women being looked down on or being silenced.
Yes.
And two of our members were able to actually felt confident enough through the support that they got that they actually reached out to their abusers and were able to
Okay.
have conversations about it. So um, it all comes down like Lotus M is all about creating a network and creating that
Yes.
support system that we need. And final thing that I'll talk about is that we do have a chapter with the Canadian Association of Girls in Science.
Yes.
And that through that we do monthly hands-on STEM activities, and this is
Okay.
run by two of our coordinators, Priya Iyer and Gopika. Oh gosh, Natkunam, I think her last name
Okay.
is.
Yeah.
Oh no, I'm sorry, Gopika. Um, but the two of them, they do a fantastic job in finding people who can lead hands-on activities with
Yes.
young girls. So
Okay.
these are things that are ongoing, and then we have a lot of things in the works as well.
Okay. That's very interesting and very motivating for South Asian girls and women in STEM. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, it's not just there's a lot of parents that come and ask me, well, what about our boys?
Yeah.
And a lot of times what I end up telling them is we're not telling boys you can't go in,
Yeah.
but the problem is girls get very mixed signals. A
Yes.
lot of South Asian girls are raised with the mindset you have to go through STEM
Yeah.
because we need to have you married.
Yeah.
Become a doctor or an engineer or a lawyer so that we can show up, and not all parents, but
But
there is a pride that comes with it. But sometimes parents forget what kind of support kids need when they go into STEM.
yes.
And for those girls to have a support system in place where they can go and ask questions,
Yes.
um, they can go and ask about, I'm thinking about such and such as a career or doing this in school, and I have no idea how to do it.
Yes.
That's a huge component. And how we raise our girls is also to be nice and be obedient and don't talk back. And
Yeah.
they aren't raised to voice their opinions. They're not raised to have an overconfidence about them. Very few of them do. And that can actually affect their
Hmm.
career paths as well.
Okay.
So, our idea with Lotus STEM is also to ensure that parents understand we're not saying no boys,
Yes.
boys are allowed.
Yeah.
But what we're saying is we're approaching this so
Yes.
that the girls are supported and boys can understand
Hmm.
why they need girls in STEM.
Yeah. And that's very important, and that's a very important point that you're addressing. So that brings to my next question. As a South Asian woman, how has your experience been in STEM, and how different is STEM compared in India compared to North America or Europe?
I'll answer the first part of that. How
Yeah.
has my experience as a South Asian woman been in STEM?
Yeah.
Um, so growing up, I wanted to be a doctor,
Mhm.
like almost
Everyone.
everyone
Yes.
who's interested in science.
Yeah.
And my parents tell me I used to walk around with a stethoscope asking everyone to call me Dr. Rupali.
Mm.
So that was like, that's how committed I was to the
Yeah.
concept. And when it came to applying to university, my dad really pushed for me to go into software engineering. He
Okay.
was like, you're good in math, just go into engineering. And I was like, no, everyone else is in engineering. I'm going to do something different.
Yeah.
So obviously, I went into science, but it wasn't until I reached university second year that I realized I actually like doing research, and I
Yes.
didn't know scientists existed in today's day and age. This is pre-internet, right? Like this
Yes.
isn't people were everywhere. You could follow
Yeah.
on Instagram. You can follow people. Like this wasn't at that time. I didn't know. I only learned of scientists as like Einstein and Newton.
Definitely. Yes.
I I had no idea you could be a scientist now.
Yes.
And when I went and told my parents that I don't want to go into medicine, I actually want to go to grad school, the shock that they had, and they kind of threw their hands up in the end. They were like, "We don't know how to support you.
Mhm.
We don't know what this looks like. We don't know what
Yeah.
grad school is. And we have no idea. We know what doctor being a doctor means, but what
Yes.
does this mean?" That was a first hurdle
Mhm.
that I had to deal with and learn that it's okay to do something that your parents may not have
Yeah.
much of an idea about. And then came my master's. And when you are, I was 22, and my parents had being fairly conservative. I guess they're like conservative, liberal Indian parents.
Yeah.
They were like, okay, we need to start looking for guys and get you married.
Yes.
So I went through all of my grad school
Yeah.
being set up one after another while
Mhm.
dealing with the pressures of grad school, also dealing with the pressures of, well, you're not married and you can't get married and you can't leave your project. Why can't you take your project to wherever this person is living? Oh,
Yeah.
you're asking too much. You should learn to compromise. And all of those things that many of us have heard. And it's not, I don't fault my parents, it's what they knew.
Yes.
And it's scary to live in a country that you're a minority in. Really you don't know how much of the culture here you can adopt and how much of the culture from back home you should hold on to.
Yes.
So I definitely struggled with a lot of that. I struggled with my identity as an Indo-Canadian.
Yeah.
How Indian am I? I didn't fit in Canada, so I'm
Yeah.
not really Canadian, but I don't fit in India, so I'm not really Indian. And it's that intersection, and that definitely bleeds over because when you're in STEM, you're not just that. You're a human being.
Yes. Yeah.
Everything outside affects you. And that it took a toll on me
Yeah.
through grad school. And like my PhD supervisor, as well as all of my colleagues while I was doing my PhD, they all saw that struggle. They
Mhm.
constantly saw me have my dips and then have my highs and then have dips
Yes.
again. Every single time a relationship didn't work out that my parents set up,
Yeah.
I blame myself. And you start to hear like, oh, my health isn't good because you are not getting married. And there's all of that starts to add up. And that took a toll on my self-esteem.
Mhm.
So by the time I started my postdoc, my self-esteem was low. And on top of that, my postdoc was not a good experience, which caused
Yeah.
me to dip even further.
Uh-huh.
So I wish throughout my STEM career, I had someone that I could look up to. I had someone that I could go and talk to who had experienced this themselves.
Yes.
And I didn't have that. I throughout my graduate school career, I did not have a single South Asian professor,
Uh-huh.
South Asian woman professor. I had one male professor,
Okay. Okay.
but other than that, there was no one that I could reach out to, and that's a problem. There's a representation issue. When you look at undergraduate level, there are so many South Asians
Yes.
here, but you don't see it at, you can see it at grad level, you don't see it at the postdoc, you don't see it at research associate, and you definitely don't see it at that professor level.
Yeah.
So that's something that really affected, like not having that representation, that affected my ability to believe that I could actually do
Uh,
academia.
okay.
um, in terms of how different is it between North America and India, I'm still learning
Mhm.
what the programs are like in India, how it differs from college to college and may differ from like state to state even.
Mhm.
um, and I think in India it's a very different type of a struggle where it's not only a patriarchal society, it's
Yes.
very patriarchal. and very Hindu centric
Yeah.
and very, um, yes, you should do this, but you have to learn how to balance
Yes.
household, and that pressures on you. It's there's even like you can't don't go away from home, live
Yes.
away from home for school.
Yeah.
Um, Language starts to become an issue. And how grad school and how supported grad school is something that I'm still learning about
Uh-huh.
India. I don't know how much of it is set up as a stipend the way it is
Yes.
here in Canada or in
You're. Yeah.
Europe.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can actually survive on a grad school salary.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like in India? I'm not sure. So those are things that I'm still learning.
Uh-huh.
But the struggles in India are it's more deeper rooted in terms
Mm-hmm.
of within the society as well.
Yeah.
My family did move away when I was fairly young, but I've gone back, and I know I've gone back like many times. Every summer we would go back.
Yeah.
So India is second home to me, but I was never really treated as a local. I was
Okay.
always treated as an NRI, which is non-resident Indian.
Yes.
And with that, I got certain privileges that local women didn't, or local girls didn't.
Okay.
And that's it's something that I want to focus on with
Mm-hmm.
through Lotus STEM. I
Yes.
do want to focus on, but it'll take some time before we get there, before
Okay.
we can create a greater support system
Oh,
there. It's going to take a lot of learning on my end before I feel comfortable enough to be like,
yes.
yes, we can come in. I
Mm.
need locals to be doing that
Yes.
work. I can't come in and
Yeah, of
try
course.
and be like, this is how you improve society.
Mhm.
That's not my place.
Yes. So, in the beginning, I think you mentioned that your partner and your colleagues have been really supportive. So, what can everyone do to support women in STEM right now?
Listen to them,
Okay. Yes,
really.
definitely.
Like when, so my PhD and my master's,
Yeah.
um, I ended up in labs that were very female centric.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't have an issue where I felt like being a woman in STEM is going to hold me back. It
Yes.
wasn't something that I had felt or noticed
Yeah.
because I was surrounded by women. We were all doing what we needed to do.
Mhm.
When I went to my postdoc, though, there was a power struggle
Okay.
all of a sudden, and I very easily got delegated duties that were more administrative,
Uh-huh.
and I got labeled as the lab mom, which
Uh-huh.
I had an issue with. And as much as I tried to step away from that, and I tried to voice that this is taking too much of my time,
Yes.
I need to do research.
Yeah.
I got told it's something simple.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy for you to do, or you're not being productive enough. And I was
Yeah.
like, how can I be productive enough if I'm taking so much time doing all this other stuff? How do you expect me to be productive? So I think one of the biggest things is really truly listen. Listening skills are so important. And when women are saying that this is a problem, don't try and brush it off. Don't try and tell them that you're making a bigger deal. Is
Yeah.
it that time of the month? I actually heard that once. No, that's not okay. That is not at all acceptable to
Yeah.
say something like that. I've had my PI tell me, don't get pregnant during a postdoc.
Yeah. That's absurd.
However, if I were a male, that would never come up. That would have never been. It's when it comes to colleagues, listen to the complaints
Mm-hmm.
and stand up.
Yes.
You don't have to make a big deal about it right in front of everyone,
Yeah.
but you can go to the person who said something wrong and tell them that's incorrect. Don't treat her that way.
Yes.
That's important. That's how you're not speaking for her.
Yes.
Don't ever speak for her,
Yeah.
but let her know that you're by her side and you do not have an issue actually using your position of power or your position of privilege
Yes.
to help her as well.
Okay.
Yeah. Those are my big ones. Like really listening is the biggest thing. Don't
Yes.
brush it aside.
Yeah. That's a very important thing that everyone should learn. Listening is a very important skill. So, as we are running out of time, but I just wanted to ask you this question about how to start a non-profit organization in Canada or in India. Just some brief tips.
Uh, just do it.
Okay.
I'm still learning as I
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
Um, I talk to people,
Mhm.
definitely find out what is the regulation that
Yeah.
you do have to follow. So in Canada, you have to register.
Yeah.
I registered federally so that I'm not bound down by the province
Yes.
itself.
Yes.
Um, and all it is you fill out a form, you pay the money, and you're registered. That's it.
Okay. That's
It's
it.
very simple. It's like the same way as you would register any business,
Hmm.
you would register a nonprofit.
Okay.
Um, and do understand the distinction between a nonprofit and a charity.
Yes.
That's also important for yourself, for you to understand why you would do a nonprofit. Why wouldn't you make this a business?
Yes.
And why wouldn't it be a charity?
Yeah.
You do have to do that reading.
Hmm.
Once it's registered,
Yes.
at that point, you do have to have a board of directors.
Yeah.
And I would urge that the temptation is ask your friends to be
Hmm.
board of directors,
Yes.
which is fine. I
Yeah.
did that too. But
Yeah.
ask your friends who are actually believe and are willing to do the work.
Okay.
Otherwise, you'll be on your own.
Hmm.
And that's a struggle. Um, be selective about who you are working with. Make sure that you have a good working dynamic with them.
Yeah.
Um, so, you know, I think the more like regulatory aspect of it, I'm still
Hmm.
learning. You got to do a lot of reading. Sometimes it's easier to just ask someone one
Yes.
question at a time.
Yeah.
And right now we're trying to figure out how to file taxes. And so
Okay.
we found an accountant and I'm asking like very simple questions.
Okay.
Um, I did like one accounting course before, so I know how to like debit and credit and make my
Yes.
balance sheets, but I don't know details. So
Okay.
one question at a time,
Yeah.
doing that, learning in process, and be okay with not knowing. You're not going to know what you're doing, and you're not
Yes.
going to have a business plan,
Yes.
and that's okay. You will learn. Just
Yes.
don't expect to hit the ground running.
Uh-huh.
You're going to take some time to learn to crawl and walk before you get to that running stage.
Yeah.
Um, in Canada, federally, if you're doing something that wouldn't just work, it isn't going to benefit only local. You do
Yes.
want to benefit more than municipal.
Yeah.
I would say register federally. You just have to
Okay.
go to a government website and you can register.
Okay.
Double check that your name is something that is not being used by others.
Yes.
As a nonprofit, you're incorporated, so your name is protected,
Yeah.
and that's important. For registration, you do have to have a board of directors, so make sure
Okay.
you have that in place.
Okay.
And then after that, you'll figure things out. You write your
Okay.
bylaws. There's already bylaws in place. You just read
Yes.
them and be like, I think this works.
Yeah.
We'll change them as we go, and you're allowed to do that.
Okay.
I think people fear that you have to know everything before you start.
Yes.
You don't.
But okay. Thank you for the tips. And do you
I
have
hope they
any?
were helpful.
Yeah, they were really helpful. And do you have any hobbies or what do you enjoy the most apart from Lotus STEM and
Oh,
work?
oh my. Do I have hobbies? I
I
think
surely know you do.
I think my partner and my sister would tell you that I have a lot of hobbies.
Yes.
Um, I am what I like to call a DIYer and multimedia artist as well.
Okay.
Um, so some days it's just dance, but then other days I actually really like doing arts and crafts.
Okay.
So I'm currently of two ways. One is using recycled material and air dry clay to make dolls.
Okay.
So I'm sculpting dolls from like glass bottles and used foil.
Yes.
And the second thing is I got into woodworking over the summer. And so
Okay.
I learned how to use a circular saw, and I built myself an outdoor couch
Wow.
and a matching chair, and I have a bench and a table that I built for when the pandemic
Okay.
started, so my
Yeah.
partner had some place to sit and do work.
Yeah.
I have a lot of like wood projects that I want to
Huh?
work on all of a sudden, and
Okay.
it's so much fun. Um, I think my partner would say my hobby is to develop new hobbies,
Okay.
because every couple of months I need to try something new, and
Yes.
so I try to learn a new skill.
Yeah.
So I guess my hobby is making new hobbies.
Okay. That's a good hobby. Well, thank you very much, Rupali, for joining us today and sharing your suggestion and telling us about your work in Lotus STEM. And I hope people do join Lotus STEM and take the advantage of being a part of a supportive community. Thank you
I
once
hope so.
again. Thank you
Thank you
once
so
again.
much, and thank you for starting the
Yeah.
Addictive Brain.
Thank you. My pleasure.